1938. On February the 4th, 1938, Hitler dismisses Blomberg and Fritsch and personally takes over the war minister, setting up the Armed Forces Supreme Command. On the 12th, he meets in his Bavarian Alps dwelling the Austrian Chancellor Schuschnigg and tells him about his purposes concerning Austria. Schuschnigg had already been told of Hitler's intentions by Mussolini. He comes back to Austria thinking of calling a public vote of the country's independence. This is too much for Hitler's patience. He puts pressure on the Austrian politicians to get them to appoint the pro-Nazi Arthur Seyss-Inquart as chancellor. Once in power, he entreats the German troops to march on Austrian land. On March the 12th, Austria is occupied. The Anschluss is a fact. On the 14th, Hitler announces in Vienna, "As Fuhrer of the German nation, I hereby declare the annexation of my fatherland to the Third Reich." Then he sends a telegram to Mussolini. "Duce, thank you. I will never forget this moment." Hitler feels safe. The Wehrmacht's warfare ability is bringing about the possibility of expanding the ethnic community in a new great Germany. Flags with the swastika dress the city's streets, celebrating the leader of the modern crusade. Meanwhile, the SS are dispatching a series of persons who, according to the Fuhrer, had despised him in the past. One more time, countries that had suffered the German ambition in World War I stay unmoved before the Third Reich's challenges. On September the 12th, Hitler encourages the Germans all around the world to express their self-determination and help him build a great German country. Confronted with Hitler's aggressive expansion policy, England, France, and the United States, through Mussolini, start the first maneuvers to put a limit on the German leader's ambitions. The great power's hesitating behavior is the result of regarding the Nazi leader, as well as the Italian dictator, as a retaining wall against the expansion of Bolshevism in the Western world. Nevertheless, the British government, led by the conservative Neville Chamberlain, thought that the Treaty of Versailles had been too hard on Germany. It was advisable to review the treaty in an appeasement policy framework, something not agreed on by the also conservative Winston Churchill.
What tragedies, what horrors, what crimes has Hitler and all that Hitler stands for brought upon Europe and the world.
The diplomatic moves through Mussolini bring about a meeting in Munich on September the 29th between the British Prime Minister and the French Daladier. In spite of Hitler's yells and blows to the table, the conference is a success for Mussolini, who looks like an appeasing man in front of the world leaders. It's also a new victory for Hitler, for the Germans can see their Fuhrer getting at his objective without having to fire a single shot. The frightened Allied leaders have yielded to the Nazi leaders' demands of taking over the Sudetenland, a German-speaking Czech region whose integrity was assured by the Treaty of Versailles. The European leaders are sure that Hitler seeks war in any way, but they surrender before the irksome dictator, not paying any attention to the Czech government's appeals for help, just like they ignored the Spanish republics. Hitler's hunger for conquest seems satisfied. Chamberlain, the small worm, as the German dictator contemptuously calls him, comes back to London, feeling sure that he has achieved a lasting peace. Stepping down from the plane, holding the document in his hand, he speaks about the honorable peace. I am sure that this will be a time of peace.
When I was a little boy,
His conversation with Hitler, a common, ordinary dog in his view, has been frank and friendly. He feels satisfied because, according to him, some of the most severe clauses of the Treaty of Versailles have been corrected. The accepted solution will set the grounds for a long period of peace for Europe, says Chamberlain, feeling sure that the German ambitions have been satisfied.
we pluck this flower.
On November the 7th, Ernst von Rath, a secretary of the German embassy in Paris, is murdered by Herschel Greenspan, a German Jew who fled to France. This crime will be Hitler's alibi to launch the first great mopping up operation against the Jews, still living in Germany and Austria. The night of November the 9th is known as the Night of the Broken Glass. The SS destroy more than 2,000 synagogues and raze to the ground shops, houses, and businesses of the Jews in both countries. 25,000 are arrested and sent to concentration camps. The whole world begins to realize the Nazi horror. Most of the Western countries withdraw their ambassadors from Germany. (1939). But Hitler is still seeking war. He regards the annexation of Danzig and the corridor stretching from Germany to eastern Prussia as an issue beyond any question. This town is mostly inhabited by Germans, but was declared a free city at the end of World War I. It was currently the gate of the Polish corridor to the Baltic Sea. The Germans had never concealed since 1933 their wish to retake a city belonging to their land before World War I. They tried all kinds of strategies to reach that goal. They nominated it as a center of tourist interest in order to make the Germans visit it en masse. Then they carried out military and all kinds of works without the consent of the ruling administration, the League of Nations. The English and French secret services warned their governments of the facts taking place in the Polish corridor, as well as in this nonsensical city, embedded in the old Prussian land where the Germans do their will. The Polish government refuses to yield to the German demands and sends 2 army divisions to the area. Great Britain and France are now aware that the appeasement policy is a failure. When the German army takes over all Czechoslovakia on March the 31st, 1939, they sign with the Poles an engagement for mutual help and protection suggesting them at the same time to seek a compact with the Russians. The Poles think that they may even lose their souls with the Russians. But as bad as it gets, if their allies will not die for Danzig, they are willing to sustain their honor and face the Germans rather than surrender like Czechoslovakia. The European powers, supposedly in charge of the European balance after the Great War, behave in so submissive a fashion that Hitler, already fixed upon going to war, rejects in April the non-aggression agreement signed with Poland in 1934 and the naval engagement agreed on with the British in 1935. The Fuhrer's purposes are clear enough. In the first days of August, several European governments get entangled in secret debates in order to calm down the German leader's ambitions. The Soviet Union is the last real military threat between Hitler and his expansion plans. Stalin is well aware of the value Hitler sets on international agreements. Furthermore, he remembers very well the anti-communist agreement reached with Japan that Italy has also endorsed. He needs time, and he needs the German troops far away from the border. He knows he can't fight alone against Germany and keeps in mind all that happened in World War I. The Russian leader is one of the few rulers solidly believing in the Fuhrer's expansionist ambitions. He deems the appeasement policy a tremendous blunder that the Western countries are likely to pay a high price for. The situation being as it is, an agreement with the Germans will keep Russia away from the war and will give him the time he needs for a complete rearmament. In spite of both leaders' mutual distrust, their foreign affairs ministers meet on August the 23rd and sign the Molotov-von Ribbentrop Agreement of non-aggression between Russia and Germany. Antipathies are no hindrance for a pacific coexistence, sneers Stalin. The agreement's secret clauses explain both countries' land expansion, not only concerning Poland, but also this is the only for the Russians' benefit, the invasion of the Baltic states. The end of the beautiful 1939 Polish summer shows a mocking contrast between the peaceful country and the strain in Warsaw, the capital. The government is aware of Hitler's intentions and prepares for a new invasion of the country, the sixth in the last 250 years. Poland has no great industrial network, and its population is half of Germany's. Its army has only 350,000 men, although a reserve of 2 million more men can be mobilized. Its government is a reactionary one, persistently bragging about the fatherland, but mastered by the deeply pro-German military caste. The Polish soldier is justly renowned for his courage and high fighting spirit. The Polish cavalry has a long history full of glory and pride. On the whole, the Polish army can count on 900 tanks, 400 planes from the PZL model, mostly for training purposes, and a poor artillery. The weakness of their armament is in contrast with the people and the soldiers' courage, standing on their belief that Great Britain and France will quickly help them to check Hitler's ambitions. Germany has an army of 84 divisions amounting to 1,500,000 men, well trained in warfare. There are 6 armored divisions, 4 light armored divisions, and 4 motorized divisions. More than 3,000 tanks, light, medium, and heavy, are rounded off by almost 5,000 planes of the modern Luftwaffe. This huge army has been trained so that the units can fight in close contact. The Third Reich's military power, brought into being thanks to the disregard of the countries supposedly in charge of watching over the Treaty of Versailles, has become the strongest in the world. The German military has designed a new war tactic, the Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Inspired by the theories of Fuhrer and Hart, as well as those of the Soviet general Tukhachevsky, the new concept depends on a swift and staggering mobility of all of the armed forces units in an exercise of perfect synchronization. Hitler and his general staff had settled the Fall Weiss or White Plan since the first months of 1939. The point is to check the Bolsheviks' expansion in the world and to annihilate the Jews in Europe, said Hitler to his officers. The deadline for the attack on Poland was set on August the 26th, but it had to be postponed because of talks with Russia and the setup for the incident that would justify the invasion. On August the 31st, Operation Himmler starts, named after the SS commander, who devised the fallacy setting in motion the first guideline of the war plan. Some inmates of the Buchenwald's concentration camp, wearing Polish uniforms, are murdered in the border town of Gleiwitz. Meanwhile, SS soldiers are wearing Polish uniforms, take over the broadcasting station, and begin to shout all kinds of abuse to the German people. The news of the Polish aggression, bravely repulsed by the German army, spreads through the entire country. The great diplomatic activity displayed by some European powers has been no use. The deception has worked, and Hitler commands to launch Operation Punishment. The German army spread along the Polish border. September the 1st, 4:45 a.m. Without a previous declaration of war, 53 divisions of the German army crossed the Polish border supported by 1,600 planes. In a massive attack, they are destroying headquarters, communications, infrastructures, and supply lines in order to paralyze the main body of the Polish army. The huge warfare ability of the invasion forces is divided into 2 groups. The Northern Army Group under General Fedor von Bock includes in its southern flank the 3rd Army under General George von Kuchler, and in its right flank the 4th Army under General Gunther von Schwankruch. This group pierces in from eastern Prussia and Pomerania, heading for Warsaw. The Southern Group, under General Gerd von Rundstedt, comprises the 8th Army of General Johannes Blachowicz. Covering the left flank and attacking from Silesia, Slovakia, to clash on the Poles in the Ponsankutno district. The 14th Army of General Wilhelm List takes the right flank and through the Carpathians heads for Krakow and Przemyśl. Through the center, the 10th Army under General Walter von Richnau marches to Lodz and Warsaw. All the armies march under air support. General Kesselring's Luftflotte No. 1 shelters the northern group, and No. 4 under General Lohr takes the southern group. In a few hours, the Luftwaffe has completely annihilated the Polish Air Force. The Stutka Ju-87 connect their diving onsets onto the chosen objectives in synchronization with the pace of the panzer divisions and the land forces, marching safe under no threat from the air. The 5 invading armies march at a great speed towards Poland's heart in a pliers maneuver aiming to trap the Polish army. Warsaw is at the center of this complex maneuver, where the German armies find small resistance. Only 48 hours after the first assault, the German forces have reached 50 miles deep into Polish land. Reichenau's troops reach Lodz, while on the south, those of General List get to the River San and seize Przemyśl. September the 3rd. In the invasion's first hours, Great Britain and France had requested Hitler to instantly withdraw the troops. They are now stupefied at the failure of their policy concerning the Third Reich. The declaration of war on Germany is put into effect. World War II has started, and unlike for World War I, the names of the people to blame for it are known. At 9:00 p.m., a German U-30 sinks the British ship Athenia on its way to Canada with 1,200 passengers on board. 112 are murdered, along with 28 Americans. At that, President Roosevelt declares on the radio, "Nobody is to think that the United States will join the European war. We are a neutral country." Australia and New Zealand declare war on Germany, and the British government sends 10 Blenheim bombers to raid the Wilhelmshaven naval facilities in Germany. September the 8th. In the first week of the invasion, the Wehrmacht has pushed the Polish army over the river Vistula, where they hope to prop up their resistance. A section of General Reichenau's 10th Army reaches Warsaw's outskirts on September the 8th, while another marches on to the Vistula. In the northern group, the 4th German Army crosses the Vistula and heads for the capital. The southern group has destroyed the 4 Polish armies set against it and surrounds Warsaw along the east, and the West. September the 9th. On September the 9th, the Polish army under General Tadeusz Kutuzov launches a counterattack on the 8th German Army near Kutno. In the battle around the river Bezura, 20 Polish divisions get entrapped in a pliers maneuver of the German army. 180,000 Polish soldiers are taken prisoners. Hitler is enforcing his domination over Poland, not only with his impressive warfare capacity, but also through the atrocities committed after the infantry has left 3 regiments of the SS Teutonhöfke division. Reinhard Heydrich had ordered his officers at the beginning of the invasion. It is compulsory to eradicate the Polish middle class and ruling class. The Fuhrer had ordered the army not to get in the way of the SS and their task. September the 10th. The Canadian government declares war on Germany. In France, the first units of the British Expeditionary Force begin to land. It amounts to 170,000 men, 25,000 vehicles, and hundreds of artillery pieces. Meanwhile, Guderian and his panzer divisions cross the river Neru and march to Brest-Litovsk. The 4th Panzer Division charges to southwest Warsaw. They spread through the streets, finding a hard resistance. The northern German army sets bridgeheads across the Vistula, thus fulfilling the second pliers maneuver in order to trap the main section of the remnants of the Polish army. September the 15th. The Wehrmacht focuses all its efforts on the central portion of Poland, tackling the arrival of reinforcements to Warsaw. Hitler asks the Polish army to surrender, but they refuse. Poland does not surrender, and its beaten army still fights in the north and in the south against the huge amount of German forces. September the 17th. Polish soldiers take the final blow when the Russian troops invade the eastern part of the country. The Soviets find small resistance, and on the 20th, they rejoin the German troops on the banks of the river Dniester. The secret agreement between Hitler and Stalin has worked. Poland is seized on the west by the German army and on the east by the Russian army. Thousands of Polish soldiers, officers, and pilots are able to break the siege and flee to Romania, Hungary, or Latvia. September the 25th. In Warsaw, German troops still find a strong resistance. Hitler and his general staff order Operation Kosta, the ultimate assault on the capital. The German Air Force and artillery have ruthlessly bombed day and night the Polish capital on both banks of the river Vistula. In 24 hours, the historical city is brought down to ashes. The surviving citizens and soldiers are starving. September the 27th. At 2 p.m., the exhausted defenders of Warsaw surrender. A garrison of 140,000 men and officers leave town to yield their weapons. With Warsaw in German hands, the nearby town of Modlin, one of the last spots still resisting, surrenders 2 days later. The Polish government and its general staff have successfully fled to Romania. The country is split along the River Bug in 2 occupation zones, one German and one Russian. The Germans have lost 10,500 soldiers, the Russians around 800, but in the Polish army, the losses amount to 500,000 dead and 750,000 prisoners. Poland has been conquered in less than a month. It's one of the quickest campaigns in military history. The country's slow agony begins when the Russians send 1.5 million Poles in deportation to Siberia. On the other hand, the Germans send millions of civilians to concentration camps like Auschwitz and Treblinka, where most of them are murdered in gas chambers. In their mopping raids, the SS burn the synagogues down and murder thousands of army officers. Hitler has followed the invasion from his private train, the America, where he has established his headquarters since he left Berlin in the first days of September. He feels like a new Napoleon. His talents as a military strategist are now proved by the swift Poland campaign. Meeting with his high command, he personally takes in charge the Wehrmacht military planning and announces those attending the meeting his plan to conquer all of Europe. Nobody has ever achieved what I have achieved. The Third Reich will last for 1,000 years. After the conquest of Poland, Hitler addresses the Reichstag on the 30th. He proposes to start peace talks with the countries in war with Germany. The London and Paris governments refuse the proposal, worried by the Fuhrer's territorial ambitions and the support the Soviets have granted him in splitting the Polish state. Furthermore, the hope of seeing Germany running out of supplies is a delusive idea, for Stalin is efficiently fulfilling his agreements with Hitler and is largely supplying him with oil and coal. It is obvious that the Nazi leader's expansionist policy has kindled World War II, a fact that hardly any of his generals of the OKW, Armed Forces Supreme Command, hoped for after their victory in Poland. In the wake of his first step, the Fuhrer's only way out is to keep on going ahead to total war. He orders to increase the attacks upon French and British ships, and at the same time calls for a meeting of the OKW in order to wrap up the final details for the invasion of Western Europe. Meanwhile, Stalin takes advantage of the international confusion brought about by the invasion of Poland to spread his control over the Baltic Sea area. He signs defense agreements with Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. The territorial disputes between the Russians and Finland had been stashed away by the non-aggression agreement of 1932. However, the Soviets, elated by their agreement with Hitler, are ready to grab a slice of Finnish land. October. On the 1st, British bombers fly over Berlin, dropping leaflets against the Nazi regime and its leaders. Galled by this psychological war, Hitler flies to Warsaw on the 5th to preside over the victory parade arranged in his honor. Later on, in a meeting with foreign journalists, he declares, "Behold Warsaw. Take a good look at it, because what you see, I can do in any other European city." With this attitude, the Fuhrer tries to scare the governments of Paris and London, forcing a deal without having to restore the Polish state. Lord Halifax, the British foreign minister, is not moved and instructs Hitler that for Great Britain, the only possible deal is for Germany to withdraw to the Munich Agreement's borders and to destroy its huge warfare power. But the Nazi leader argues that his land policy will only end when Germany retrieves its greatness previous to World War I. The head of the Wehrmacht, General Wilhelm Ketzel, and the rest of the OKW officers are planning the attack on Western Europe. They tell Hitler that they think it's profitable to wait a bit until they can get a larger supremacy in weapons. However, the Fuhrer's restlessness is made clear when he replies, "It's never too early to launch an onslaught." The defiant German attitude increases when on the 14th, the U-47, under Major Gunther Prien, in a dauntless attack, crosses the anti-submarine shield of Scapa Flow Base in the Orkneys and sinks the British battleship Royal Oak, severely damaging the Repulse. The killing of the 780 soldiers on board is an amazing blow to the British people and the British government. They feel now on the brink of a war at sea. Substantiation of this fear comes on the 18th when Hitler, in his guideline number 7, authorizes the German U-boats to sink every enemy ship within reach, regardless of their carrying passengers or not. At the same time, he orders to route magnetic mines in the Allies' sea traffic vital spots. November. At the beginning of November, a group of scientific researchers announces to Hitler that they are looking into the possibility of using nuclear fusion as a warfare weapon. They predict its destruction power to be prodigious. Elated by what he deems a feat of the Aryan race, the Fuhrer declares in a meeting, "Soon we will be able to use an unconquerable weapon." He was perhaps thinking about his wish to invade Western Europe on the 12th of the month. Albert Einstein, a Jewish scientist exiled in the United States, is aware of the German preliminaries about the atomic bomb and reveals to President Roosevelt that its power for destruction is unthinkable. Therefore, the world must avoid at all costs such a weapon to fall into Nazis' hands. The American president is persuaded that something must be done. And on the 4th, he attends an anxious meeting with the Congress in order to reform the Neutrality Act. Roosevelt is worried about the situation in Europe, being well aware of it, thanks to his many conversations with Churchill and with the U.S. ambassadors in the area. His aim is to allow the Allied powers to buy weapons from American companies through the cash and carry system. On one hand, it's a first step to help the British and the French, and on the other, the American weapons industry and its ascendancy on the world undergo spectacular growth. Great Britain is the first country to ask for a massive importation of American weapons. On the 28th, the British government sends a section of the fleet to the North Sea in an attempt to sever German freight traffic lines. Hitler replies with his guideline number 9, in which he abuses the British government and promises to annihilate this people, prime mover of the war. On the 30th, after promoting a border incident, 600,000 Soviet soldiers with naval support rush onto Finland. Stalin's air force raiding Helsinki arouses the anger of the people bravely fighting against the invasion. Thanks to their knowledge of the land and their experience in warfare on frozen ground, the Finnish troops entrenched themselves against the Soviet soldiers, trying to pierce through the north, east, and south of the country. The Finnish government asks the League of Nations to arbitrate in order to end the strife. But Stalin refuses to talk, so the country he rules with an iron fist is ejected from this organization. The strong resistance of the Finnish troops in the Isthmus of Karelia and the many losses of the Soviet army lead to peace talks between both countries. The Treaty of Moscow ends the struggle. Finland has not surrendered and keeps its independence even though it has lost 25,000 men and 10% of the country. The Soviet army has lost 200,000 men, dead or wounded. December 1939. On the 11th, Vidkun Quisling, former Norwegian defense minister and founder of the National Union Party, wishing to rule the country as a faithful ally of the Third Reich, meets Hitler to suggest to him that German troops, supported by members of his party, could very well take over Norway. Due to the German need for raw materials, Hitler accepts Quisling's idea and orders his general staff to draw an invasion plan for the North countries depending on their resources and strategic position. The Swedish iron mines are essential to sustain the German armament capacity. But at first, Hitler chooses to respect Swedish neutrality to obtain iron in a Pacific way, as was usual. On the other hand, Norway's long coastline to the North Sea is spotted with bases such as Bergen, Narvik, and Trondheim. The German military regard them as vital strategic spots to be put under control. Their position makes them unavoidable objectives to launch effective attacks on the Strategic Naval Command at the British base of Scapa Flow in the Orkney Islands. February 1940. The English and French governments try to run a common policy to throttle the Third Reich's raw materials supply lines. Through the Allied Supreme War Council, they ask the neutral Sweden to cease supplying Germany with iron, shipped from the Norwegian harbor of Narvik. If not, both powers will feel compelled to interrupt it by force. The British prove how serious their intentions are when on the 16th, the cruiser Arthusa and the destroyer Cossack, disregarding the neutrality issue, sail through Norwegian waters looking for the German prison ship, the Altmark. It was a support ship to the lost battleship Graf Spee and carries on board 300 English prisoners, survivors from the sinking of the two Royal Navy ships. The fact of taking refuge in Norwegian waters cannot check the English to board the ship, setting free their fellow countrymen and killing 7 German sailors. Startled by the English boldness, and with his secret services reporting as a fact the Anglo-French operation in the North Sea and the Baltic, Hitler thinks the British have decided to take over Norway. On the 21st, he appoints General Nikolaus von Falkenhorst as head of the invading forces and orders to speed on Operation Vesrubrum. While pondering the operation, the German General Staff and von Falkenhorst think it compulsory to take over the Danish airports in order to ensure communication lines. As a result, the operation is divided into 2 steps. Operation North Vesrubrum will take over Norway with 5 big naval squads carrying troops to the landing sites. Battleships Scharnhorst and Neishau with 10 destroyers make up the first group, bound for Narvik. The cruiser Hyper and 4 destroyers will sail to Trondheim in the second group. The third group will be made of the cruisers Koln and Kongsbergen, bound for Bergen. The fourth group, with the cruiser Karlsruhe and 2 torpedo boats, will take over Kristiansand. The last group, with the cruisers Blucher, Lutov, and Enden, and some minor units, will have to take over Oslo, the Norwegian capital city. Operation South Vesrubrum is pointed at the invasion of Denmark. 2 motorized brigades must speedily cross the country and take over the Jutland Peninsula. The deadline date for both operations is April the 9th. Seeing the situation of the events in Europe, Roosevelt sends his state secretary, Sumner Welles, to submit a peace plan to the governments of Paris, London, Berlin, and Rome.